may not be able to, or they don't actually have a great capacity and short-term memory, and they might not be able to memorize numbers or to do calculation in their head while listening or reading the material. So if it's a reading or listening particular comprehension, they don't really have the ability to check it, to listen it twice. If they hear their input, the student hears, yeah, John and Mary are going shopping today. They will buy 6 oranges, 2 melons, and 3 candy bars. It's probably not a good idea to ask how many items will they purchase, because again, it's not listening comprehension, it's something else. It's basically memory and counting. So yeah, so exactly what you test here, make sure that you actually test what you claim that you are testing. Another thing, for instance, if your idea or your construct of reading comprehension incorporates the ability to infer meaning, in addition to actually claim it, you have to present students with the opportunity to show this ability to infer meaning from the context. And here would be an example, very simple, enough probably for the first year students. The vast majority of parents in a recent survey favor stricter attendance regulations at their children's schools. Which of the following could be true? So if you have this kind of statement and you're not a speaker, you should be able to discern the idea, what it actually means that parents want strict regulations. Most parents want stricter attendance rules. Many parents want stricter attendance rules. Only a few parents think current attendance rules are acceptable. Some parents think current attendance rules are acceptable. So this is what we are targeting. We are targeting the ability to infer from the input. Another example of structuring the question would be the ability to discern logical connections. It's probably already we're talking about the first or second year. It's probably the third year. It's between intermediate and advanced levels when students presented with the text understand the logic, even if there is no linguistic means that rhetorical means that signal certain relationship, yet the ability to read is sufficient enough to establish this logical relationship. So if there are two phrases like increasing levels of pollution have an extremely adverse effect on the environment, would be followed by the government has established regulations to limit the amount of noxious fumes emitted into the atmosphere. And the question would be, what does the second sentence do? It simplifies the first sentence, it explains the reason for the result mentioned in the first sentence, it gives a solution to the problem that is stated in the first sentence, it draws a conclusion about what is stated in the first sentence. So again, as you can see, we're targeting students' ability to make logical inferences. And if we believe that this is a part of reading comprehension for a certain level. If we don't, then we don't need this kind of questions. Also, for instance, if you want to check vocabulary outside of context, there could be exercises or activities like this. When you are asked, is a student or is a test taker, you are asked to eliminate an item that you list appropriate in the category. And let's see, if we have a first category, dog, walk, live, fish, you can go either by taking out dog and leaving only verbs, because it's possible to walk, it's possible to live, it's possible to fish. But it's also possible to exercise cultural schema. We all know that in most cultures that we represent, people go for a walk with a dog. People take a dog with a leash for a walk. So if we exercise in this cultural schema, then the fish would be the word that would be taken out. And then we'll know what students actually understand and what we're actually targeting. We're targeting cultural knowledge.
So what is number one measuring? I thought that it was measuring the meaning of the vocabulary, like if it's the meaning, it looks like there are two things going on. Like the one is apparently a verb, the other three can be nouns. So walk will be singled out, but it can also relate to dog and fish. I can't clearly see like
Exactly.
That's
Exactly.
why
It's
problematic. So that's
why it's
This is an
problematic.
example of
Yes,
problematic.
it's an example of problematic.
Oh,
An
okay.
example that would probably tell you who your students are. Either they're grammarians who don't really care about meaning if they go by noun versus verb. However, if they go by content and they will be representative of a holistic kind of approach to learning, those students, and they would also be more attuned to cultural aspects, they would probably know the schema of taking a dog for a walk, using the leash, putting the leash on the dog, keeping the dog on the leash. And again, it's not in every culture that dogs are walked on the leash and taken out. So that would be already tapping into the cultural knowledge again.
I have a general question about these examples here. I mean, yes, they are all in English, of course, but we are all teaching foreign languages. So, and I mean, maybe we're saying the same thing. I'm also at a point where like the end of the semester here, but if let's say dog walk, lead fish, no matter which language it is, do I want to construct a question that means in order to do the question right, I have to know all 4 words. What happens if you, for instance, you just happen to say, okay, if I take the last one, impudent, insolent, audacious, pompous. What happens if you don't know it, impudent, and you're a foreign language learner? So that doesn't really, then you cannot do it right.
Exactly.
And so it's for me, it's really the question as foreign language teachers or testers, do I want to test kind of like vocabulary and grammar and listening, whatever, or do I want to test something like logic?
Exactly. Again.
And I mean, for me, it would be, I'm not really testing logic, I'm testing, I mean, yes, you need a certain amount of logic to function in this world, but no, I wouldn't necessarily put the logic things.
But no,
Yeah.
these to my mind are ways to ensure that a student knows meaning. So they end up being sort of logical, but they are a way to exactly to know whether a student knows vocabulary. So it ends up, the first one, I agree with you, becomes a sort of logic one where depending on what kind of a thinker you are, you don't do well. The very last one, I think, is very good at testing meaning. There are 4 words. If you don't know all 4 of them, you can't figure out that one of them doesn't fit, perhaps.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
And also the second one to me is problematic. Take the bull by the horns is a phrase in English, but maybe you're from Thailand and the phrase there is take the elephant by the horns, you know? I
Maybe,
don't
but
know.
maybe
But
you're trying to
that's
test
the
knowledge of
idea.
idiomatic
Exactly.
expressions.
Exactly.
If you are, good, but
Yeah.
you can see that there's problems with each of them.
Yeah.
That's what I'm explaining, that construct is very important, like what exactly you're measuring. And with the number 4, it's definitely, you need to know all the abstract words outside of the context to be able to answer this. And perhaps for your program, it's very important to distinguish between first and second year, the amount of language they have, the amount of vocabulary they have. And if they don't answer this correctly, or series of this correctly, then for you, if the vocabulary is the must in the course, then it would be the way to go.
I was just listening to you and I was thinking something else. This is probably a more basic question. It's kind of like I'm getting suspicious of questions that really test like punctual knowledge, because let's say vocabulary. Students come from different schools. They have different books. They don't have the same vocabulary. So it's not for me to say, okay, let's test what they know, but more like, let's test what they can do with it. So, I mean, if, let's say, if there's kind of 4 words and I know 3, and I can actually use them, and can show that I use them, that's much more meaningful than saying, oh, I just kind of know the English equivalent to 4 words. And it might not show that I can actually use them properly. So,
Yeah,
and that's another level.
But a counter argument to that is that for any given language we teach, I know that frequency counts exist. So, you know, you have the top 500 most frequent words in a language, or you know, there are people who do corpora studies to determine the frequency. So I think it's not unrealistic to test discrete functional knowledge of fundamental vocabulary. I see what you're saying, but I don't think it's out of place to
Think about it.
But that's exactly the argument. What is the construct of the knowledge you are testing? If the knowledge of vocabulary is part of your curriculum, then yes, you might benefit from this kind of test. If not, if you are testing certain abilities, then probably it's not the best way to go. So you are making the decisions, and you have to be aware of what they need.
It seems like there's one other thing, and that is, when are you doing this in the semester? I know that we have some proficiency tests for some of our languages, and some instructors have used it at the beginning and at the end so that they can have the students see the difference between the two scores. And, you know, if you blow the students away at the very beginning of your class, that's probably not your best tack as a teacher. You might want some more challenging things later on. But the first one, it wouldn't be good to give them a successful experience, you know? Oh, I know it this well? That might be a good thing for a student, you know? So timing in the semester might also be a factor.
But if this is a placement test,
Oh, if it's a placement test, it's a totally different argument.
aren't we talking about
Yeah,
placement
we're
tests?
placement test.
Oh, I thought we were talking, it does say placement test. I had proficiency test every time I read that.
No, it's not.
Sorry.
That's a major issue, guys, and I want to emphasize it as I can, that we don't test proficiency. We only test for proficiency if your curriculum is actually aligned with proficiency. But basically, we are testing to place students into our program.
Yeah.
If our program is not proficiency-based, maybe we don't need to test for proficiency. We need to test for very specific sets of knowledges that matter within our concrete programs.
Thank you for bringing me online.
Viveka, did you have a question?
Okay, no.
All right. So I'm moving on. You see, like all this is very contested, and it's again, it requires lots of thinking and reasoning. So make sure that you know your reasons. I was just thinking about how I would go about it. We don't have this thing online, and if I were to develop this test. Again, for instance, if I want to distinguish between the first and second semester of the first year Russian, I would definitely go with grammar, because I know that usually by way Russian is taught throughout pretty much the world to foreigners, that certain cases, we have 6 cases, certain cases are not introduced until the later in the second semester. So for me, it would be a good measure to tell, okay, whoever doesn't know it goes down. Same with verbs of motion or other constructions. So with Russian language, it's very easy to tell and to actually set these grammatical features very concretely. Again, if I want to distinguish reading comprehension between the two, it wouldn't be that decisive as grammar. Because they would still operate within the same simple descriptions, simple narrative, and simple types of text, announcements, menus, lists of all sorts. So this is not a great predictor at the first or second level. Going up, then it might actually change, because I might start changing the types of text, I might add ability to infer meaning. I might add more complicated meaning, like culture-based meanings, and then it would matter. But for the first or second year, grammar would be better predicted for me, and I would probably won't bother with assigning or devising lots of reading or listening comprehension for the first or second year, because it won't be very telling. Again, how to eliminate the number of questions. A simple logic. There is a sequence in acquisition. So why test, if we take English as an example, it's easier that because we all share this language. If we want to know that students actually have acquired past tense, past indefinite, let's say, it's pretty much safe to assume that if students know how to form irregular verbs, they would probably know how to form regular verbs. If students know how to say I went, or I dreamt, or I ate, yes, they would probably know how to say I baked, I looked, whatever. So this is logic. By similar talking, again, if you are checking for conditional, you can safely assume that students will know certain tenses in English. That's why it's going to be telling. So this is how we decide about the benchmarks. So we might know tons of features that distinguish between levels that we want to cut and separate, but we need to select the most telling features, not every feature, but the most telling feature that separates levels that we want to separate. I think that's enough for now, and I will bring us back to all the general questions. And I will open the floor to people who actually give their tests and rely on the online testing and have a good process, because I'm not talking from experience. My only experience with testing was pretty much at Millbury, where I devised tests and they were all in paper. So yeah, ridiculous.
I have a so are there any language that are online, like they are not manual, so how can I have a pilot online listening test in English? Like, is it,
You have to develop it.
we have to develop it?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a module that other languages can?
They will share, yeah, there's no particular module, but just by looking at what we have currently, you can tell what the module is, because if you look what is there, pretty much it's grammar, which means multiple choice, right? Some have cultural awareness, but I believe it's also multiple choice. Vocabulary, it's probably multiple choice or discrimination, like we did. Readings, it's all multiple choice. It must be multiple choice for easy assessment. And listening, that's how they're all organized, that's all.
Is this rubric available online?
No, but yeah, once you decide to go on to this, we can sit down together and we can discuss how to do it, and then get in touch with the computer team. And if you have your product, at least in paper, like version, then we can go there.
Or in Word.
Yes, that's what we want there. Basically, you have to develop it first on paper. Like you have to have your categories. You have to know what you want to test, the number of questions you want to pose, the number of levels you want to separate. And when you have it, your like instrument, then you'll go and decide how to go about it.
Okay. So this is not available right now, these slides at CLE? No, not for reference.
No.
Okay.
And it's not, CLE doesn't host it and doesn't develop it.
I'm just wondering if this because this is new, the online placement, if we can do that, every semester, every year 2 times we do the placement. So if this could be done online, and if there is a, because every language would have a different placement test. But just to get an idea that these are similar kind of tests for first, second, third year. I think that is helpful. I can email you if you don't mind sharing this. Okay, thanks.
Also, Maria, didn't you say that the tests that you've done for placement have just been on multiple choice? Is that correct?
Well, yes. We did 4 types of tests. We did grammar, we did listening, we did reading, and we did OPI.
And so, if
in
it's multiple
OPI,
choice, you
was-
could do that in Canvas right now.
Yes,
After you had it written down or had in a Word document,
Yes.
you could easily convert it to a Canvas.
This is a little part of argument that I left out in a way intentionally, but you are bringing me up to this. So, if you're a student applying to this university that claims that it teaches 70 plus languages, this is first page that you see as an applicant to the university. Once you're accepted, you have to take 2 exams, science exam, placement test, and language placement test. And these are the only languages that you actually see as a freshman. So, in my opinion, it's not just a matter of placement test, it's a little bit ideological and a matter of promotion and a matter of recruitment. If your test is there and you're visible as a language. Again, I might be wrong. Maybe students don't care. Maybe they're like so swamped with whatever they're doing and gullible. And again, like they thought they learned Spanish for like 7-10 years. It's the only language they know, and they don't care whichever language they see. However, in my naive beliefs, I think, oh, what if they see more languages than just those? Maybe they will feel sudden attraction.
I understand the Gulliver test. Why isn't
They're there. I just.
It's just down below. Okay, I see. I get it. Oh, okay.
Oh, there we go.
This little egg.
So these are the tests that are in pilot stage.
It's not pilot.
No.
They're real.
They are real, okay. So yes, students want to see this, but is there a place where here on this page, in this website, tests that are not there, but students can take the languages? Like my students, they come and they say, I didn't know Hindi was offered here.
There is a link, but again, being a novice student, like coming from the school here, you see this link, but you immediately forget it. There is a link on the first year experience that tells if you are not, if your language is not in this category, then follow the link. And they probably never follow the link, they just,
Yeah.
Sorry to butt in, but I suggest that we just kind of talk about our experiences now, because otherwise we might just run out of time, and that will also that might give you ideas.
Yeah.
Because I don't know what Kelly did, and Kelly doesn't really know what we did, so I'm really looking forward to hear how she went about it. And I don't know, is it okay? I mean, Kelly says it's okay if we start. Yeah. If there's any more questions?
I just want to say that the reason you see these up here is because somewhere, mostly in the United States, there are K through 12 schools that teach these courses because it's mandatory through IU policy that if a student comes in with prior knowledge of the language, that they're required to take the test or transfer students. So that's why you see these up here. Now you might want to ask yourself, are you in a situation where this is a requirement? We're talking about placement tests, not proficiency tests. That you would want to put up a placement test. Because it might be that there is no demand for a placement test because there's no students coming in to IU needing to take these exams. these are all up here because we were originally forced by the university to come up with an online version. Not like we wanted to come up with an online version. And I'm not going to get into the myriad of craziness that went on about that. But what we'll share with you now, and Susanna will lead off, is basically we as a department, we're going to create an adaptive proficiency exam. Before we were required to do a placement exam. So Susanna and I started 8 years ago because the existing placement exam at that time was a written Wisconsin-based test, and it was way outdated. It was not. We had to change the cutoff scores because it wasn't corresponding with where the students were placing in our courses. So at that time, we had decided as a team to come together and create an adaptive, proctored, computer-generated, and that's what we first started with.
Does everybody know what an adaptive online test is?
Okay, so don't get too excited about this because this platform can't control an adaptive test, but we've got another one so that's something else. But so we were working on a different type of test when we were asked by the university to come. We were all asked by the university to come up with an non-adaptive, but computer-based placement test. And what we did is we took our ideas and transferred over to the placement test, but then continued on and created a product for an adaptive proficiency test. Why we went about doing it, what we did, Susanna can start.
Okay. Right, thank you, Troy. Can we go back to the very first slide? Because there was something that struck me. Yes. Okay. I haven't cleared the story and see whether you think the same thing, but the very first question out of the line was curriculum replacement test. I personally found it a little bit, I don't think this is the way we went. It was more like, how can we align the placement test to our curriculum? Yes. Okay, because we had courses in place that we basically really liked, that went well. So then we looked at, okay, what do we do in the first semester, second, third, fourth, whatever, and then saw like, okay, by the end of the first semester, they, according to the book, they should really know this kind of vocabulary, this kind of grammar, and then we designed the placement test accordingly. So the point really is, it's not like we have certain standards in mind, and then we modify our curriculum accordingly. But it's actually the other way around.
Yeah, you're right.
It's based on books, and I think that's a caveat here. You cannot. I believe you cannot do a good placement test without knowing the book really well, and it's always going to be on the basis of a certain book that you use. I mean, it's different. Let's say you're teaching like sort of German with a business component, for instance, which we sometimes do. Vocabulary would be different, and so I think that was the first thing I wanted to say. So what we did, painstakingly went through all 4 semesters, made a list of like, okay, these are the vocabulary items that are covered. These are the conversational structures. And then listening. Yeah, listening was kind of. We also devised a listening portion that was generally on the same level of difficulty, not like sort of. So our test has 3 sections: vocabulary, grammar, and listening.
So vocabulary and grammar is the first.
Yeah, vocabulary and grammar is together, because testing vocabulary without a context we thought was absolutely useless. So we need to do that in context. And then we thought, and that came from the adaptive placement test that we then changed over, we thought it would be really cool to, if it's online, it's so great you can work with pictures. And because pictures give you context. Usually, in the normal world, we have context, and a lot of our understanding also derives from context. Having context, the sentences on a computer screen is only going to tell you so much. So, one of my favorite happened to be, it's actually a French comic, Gaston, which I had like in German translation, Gaston comics, exactly. And we actually took, do you want to hand that around? We actually took the German Gaston version. We actually did call it, we did contact the publisher, actually the German publisher. And then like there are always kind of these 3 pictures or 2 pictures. And then there were questions about it that, like, sort of even when you didn't necessarily know, that's why we had vocab and grammar together, even if you didn't necessarily know a specific word, the context would probably give you a hint, so for also furthering contextual understanding. Do you want to say anything about, like, is it the kind of like
This structure here,
nuts and bolts?
this represents the original work that we did with the adaptive, so you can see this how it breaks down the levels. For the placement test, you're just going to look at the top level across here. So what we did to generate these questions, so students then answer 18 questions based on these triads under each of the contextual pictures. And the 18 questions then have to deal with grammar and vocabulary at increasingly higher levels. We worked with the developers. This is something that's possible that you can do with the current online structure. These are then generated in 3 different random sections. So 18 times by 3 is how many questions we came up with. And so when a student takes, it's an unproctored test, and to make it a little bit more random, they're able to randomly generate then these question sets. And part of the testing that we had to do, the trial run testing, is we had to test every individual question of every individual possible configuration. But so our first part of the grammar vocabulary is based on 48 questions, but the students get to take 18 questions of those. And they also then, we decided with our adaptive test to do a product that tests all the way up to our 7th semester proficiency. And we maintained that with our online placement test. So our online placement test tests all the way up to the, even though we were only required to do the first 4, we decided to use it all the way up to the 7th semester.
Since we more or less had it already.
Right. Our old placement test also tested up to that level. People were testing in to that level because students could take 4 years of German, 5 years of German in high school, so they could actually achieve those levels. So after the students take the grammar vocabulary section, if you want to look at the next section, they then have a reading comprehension. On our adaptive test, depending on what they scored on the first set of vocabulary and grammar, they would get then a corresponding level reading comprehension. That wasn't possible with the online placement test. So what we did is we took a selection out of each of the 3 different groups, level groups, and these were actual texts that were taken from our books that we use. So they correspond then to a meta level that's based on the Common European Framework of Reference. So our materials are based on that. The test is based on that. And these are things that have been tried and true through publishers and through trial and error. So the text then, every individual on the online test takes one small text of the first year, the text of the second year, and the text of the third year level. And every student then scores on that. This is something, Maria had said that this isn't necessary. A lot of studies have shown that you can, and we talked to colleagues when we were first designing this across the CIC, or other institutes that are similar to us. And some of them use just 20 questions, fill in the blank, and that's their placement exam. And studies have shown there are correlations. But one of the things that we have a chance to do here with this is we get results back from each individual students, the results of their grammar and vocabulary, results on the listening, or the reading comprehension, and the results on listening comprehension. And they're broken down for us, so we can analyze those. And that comes in handy when we have to advise our students. Let's say a student comes in and by their cutoff score gets placed into third semester. And the student then says, I don't know if I'm ready for the third semester based on that one score. They can come to us and ask us, am I prepared? And we can look at the different skill sets that's required in our own courses and advise that student. We could say that, well, maybe they were excellent grammarians and they scored that skewed their overall score. And then we could say, well, yeah, maybe you would be better because this is only for placement only. Maybe you would be better going into a second semester instead of a third semester course. So when we have used this online placement results for that purpose of one-on-one consultation with our individual students. And it's just an extra device, that extra support that the students then have. Because ultimately, with a placement exam, the tool needs to place the student comfortably into the right course that we're teaching. And that's not only good for the student, that's good for us as instructors, it's also good for the other students around them. So we're not necessarily looking for super proficiency, we just want to make sure that the student is being placed in the correct course. And that's why this is used as a placement and not a proficiency exam. But then, yeah, we do in the reading comprehension, we do true, false, and not enough information. Because we don't like this true-false dichotomy, because students can sometimes put true, and they get a skewed answer, so sometimes there's just not enough information. And these are all little dots they can plug in. And our listening comprehension is also based on the type of levels of recordings that we have with our materials as well. We did this all in-house. CELT here, and they have a sound studio. You can meet with them. They give you support in recording this, and then the recordings, they can go on the platform, an online platform. It's a lot of fun too. It's a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun. You can use your graduate students and other instructors to do these things. But the audio listening comprehension is not a true and false. What we have is a table of who says what. And if you want, I can quickly show it online here if you guys want to see kind of what you're able to do with the platform. If you don't want to see it, that's fine. I don't need to show it. But it's not a fill in the blank. It's not a multiple choice. It's you check it. Who's saying what?
Maybe we can go around and to everybody else who wants to share. I'd like to see it. But we could stick around at the end and see it.
Sure. And I won't get into it now because we don't have time, but if any of you guys are developing something, online placement test or even proficiency test later on, we went through, it took a full year, not an academic year to test, retest, do pilots on it, get results back, run the data through spreadsheets, analyze each individual test question, throw the ones out, or adapt them to the thing. So it's a big process.
How many students did you have tested?
I think total tests taken were in the 250
Oh, nice.
range.
We'll never have to.
Didn't we do that with the extra? Yeah, we invited students from all of our classes to do that kind of testing as kind of as a pilot, as not for the grade at all, but in order to put in that amount of time, we offered them 1% plus on their final grade. So that's how we managed to get a big number.
Yeah, we had to pay
Although
$2.
nowadays it's not clear whether it's
That's a lot.
human resources would now have to say something about it, because just offering 1% is not quite legal, apparently.
Well, you can.
Oh, I didn't know that.
You can offer.
Yeah.
You can offer.
We didn't know
1%.
that either.
No,
That's
they
why-
didn't told us.
Yeah, we were paying $20 to any of our students who would take our tests.
They at that time they didn't have any problem. Now, according to the people that are very picky about it, if you do that, you have to offer all the other students another project that they can work on instead.
If they choose not to.
They choose not to do it. So,
You did say something that may not work for all, like I was thinking of RNA studies. They probably don't have the structure that you had when you said that according to established European, I'm sure they don't have that for the language. I thought we don't have that for any of our languages. What is the impact of not having that?
Then I would suggest, because I've already spoken with several people about this, that you look at what materials you have in your courses, what you want your students to do. Pilot test it on your current students
Yeah.
at the beginning of the semester, at the end of the semester, so you have a longitudinal
Yeah.
look at that, and that will help you then determine what the cutoff scores is. 'Cause
So you
ultimately-
can still do it, you just have to guess them.
Right. Well, ultimately, it's a placement exam. So we're not saying, our cutoff scores are not necessarily directly based on some kind of actual or common European framework of
Which is
reference.
ours.
It's based on what we expect our own students at IU to achieve taking these courses. And so that's why we got results back from the incoming freshmen that summer before we did our pilot test. We ran our test. They allowed us that the paper test was administered, and those students also took the test that we had developed. And then we used, over the academic year, we took that test that we had developed with our own students, beginning and end of every semester, and then compared those with the incoming freshman results. So there was a triangulation of a bunch of things.
And have you coordinated with all those other languages that were there? Did they go through a similar process?
No, it was up to
Did
them.
anybody come to you and say, what did you do? Can I pick your brain?
Yes, I did.
Okay, good.
Some people did. And some departments have the resources to do so, some departments didn't. It also has to do with time. Because it was haphazardly put together by the provost to begin with, how this was going to be
We
developed.
were all told to make a language placement test.
I'm glad
We
you
don't
have your jobs
care,
and
we
that
don't
you did
care
it.
how you do it, just get a language placement test. Yeah. So all of us were in the same boat together.
Got it.
All those languages up there for about 2 years. We had meetings on and off, regular meetings. How's the placement test coming along? How's it going? We want to pilot the, so. And we were all, there was no workshop to help us develop our placement test. We were all left up to our own devices.
I have to use my German accent here. It sounds like they came and said, you will this placement test and you will like it.
That's kind of how it happened.
That's more or less, that's pretty accurate, actually. But
So,
you kind
yeah,
of
just to
say-
clarify, although you didn't look at the proficiency guidelines necessarily, you looked at your books. Do your books, are your books aligned? Okay, so
Yeah,
you
it's
do
not
some sort of
direct.
indirect correlation with the proficiency levels.
So, yeah,
Marvelous result.
it was a lot of work.
We haven't had to tinker, the ultimate result for us is we haven't had to tinker with our cutoff scores. They've existed since then, 3 years ago, when we, actually 4 years when we set it. The students, so ultimately, there really is no prescription on what each individual language needs to develop for their own placement exam. We can give you some best practices and some guidelines, but ultimately, what you want with an online placement exam is happy students tested into the correct,
Right.
the correct
Yeah.
course.
They'll be miserable if they're in the wrong.
Yes.
Yes.
Exactly, and which way you go about doing that is up to the individual departments, just as long as in the end you have happy students. Because you have happy students, you have happy instructors, you have happy faculty, and happy students then will have a tendency to go on to the next level. Okay, you don't want under-challenged, you don't want over-challenged students. And so far, we've had pretty good success with much better than what we had with the pre-existing paper-based Wisconsin test. So,
1% would make me happy.
Yeah, and also, I mean, when we say it's kind of, yes, it looks like an awful lot of work. We were lucky enough to have each other because we're a team. And that is also something like for you to keep in mind, don't make it too ambitious because you want to survive the process. You don't want to put this pilot in the system and then afterwards jump from Valentine hard. It's not worth it. So it's a cost effectiveness measure in a certain way. What can you do well in a certain amount of time with the available resources? And as Troy said, since we started with this kind of huge like adaptive test that we had in mind, and then had everything done, more or less, then it was relatively easy to convert it to the online form. But I wouldn't necessarily sit here and think like, oh my God, this is kind of, no, I mean, as Troy said, the most important thing is to have some sort of diagnostic tool that works for the students and not against, in terms of they're happy when they're right level. I think time to shut up.
I'll actually show you our tests. So Troy and Susanna had each other, I had nobody, but I would come to Troy and cry and say, Troy, how are you doing? And then Troy would explain to me his adaptive test and all this sophisticated stuff, and I said, that's over my head, I'm overwhelmed. I have to have this done by now. So my test is less sophisticated, but it still works. I'll just show you. It looks a lot like a traditional test that you might have taken if you were in high school or grade school in the United States. So this is a multiple choice test of grammar, reading, and listening comprehension. I should say vocabulary is indirectly tested because obviously you can't score well on reading, for example, if you don't score well on if you don't know the vocabulary. I did proceed like Susanna and Troy. I had a notion of what a student could do at the end of first semester, what the things were required of first semester, second semester, third semester, fourth semester. I also had a notion of the kinds of readings we typically put on exams and the types of listening activities. And because our classrooms are all taught in the foreign language and include the 4 skills, even if there is a correlation between grammar, I chose to include listening and reading because, let's say, a student was really great at grammar but didn't have any, had been taught in high school and but had a teacher who spoke all the time in English. I wanted to make sure they had listening skills too. So I'll just show you quickly. This is the format. I tried, in the grammar section, I tried to use very basic vocabulary so that vocabulary wouldn't be what was holding them up. Each item tests a different grammatical structure with variable levels of difficulty. But I tried to, again, keep the vocabulary extremely transparent so that I could be sure that I was testing grammar and not vocabulary knowledge. So these are just fill in the blank. I didn't start this by saying I should have a certain number of grammar, a certain number of this, a certain number of that. I just wrote questions until I was done. So I've covered all the structures. Reading comprehension, I did what Susanna and Troy did. I took readings either out of our books or off of our exams that were characteristic of that level. And I had inference questions. I had reading questions of all different levels. So this is a very short poem that a first semester French student can have access to, that we might do in class. It tests vocabulary, but it also tests kind of ability to read. So I ask a global question. This poem tells the story of, and then I have a list of things. How many people are there at the end of this poem? This is an inference question. And then again, a global thing. This poem is, would you qualify this poem as optimistic, historic, sad, or something else? So very global questions. Passage number 2 is a short little joke. Again, a lot of cognates. This is something that I think would be doable by a first or a first-year student, certainly. Containing vocabulary that a first-year student would know. Any more advanced structures, we all know that you don't have to understand every word to get the gist. Once again, these were very, very general questions. Tell me what kind of passage this is. I did some ability to use context to guess at the meaning of vocabulary words. So again, not mostly global, some smaller questions. This is a short story, an excerpt from a cute little children's book series that we often use in second year, so I took it right out of our second year. And a little bit longer. And once again, some vocabulary and context, some general questions about who are the two characters in this thing, some sociopragmatic stuff. So number 3 is a sociopragmatic question, and seeing if they can get the gist of the thing. And then once again, asking them for summarizing. Would you characterize this as ironic, sad, exciting, or racist? The next couple of passages I took from magazines. I wanted to test students up to the 3rd year level. Either they would place into first semester, second semester, third semester, fourth semester, or above, some generic above. So I wasn't concerned about 7th semester, 8th semester, making a distinction in those semesters. So the readings become more and more sophisticated, but again, they are true or false. I like Susanna and Troy's idea of I don't have enough information because it's true. Everybody knows it's a strategy just to pick A, and you're likely to get 50% right. So this was true, false. This was another one that was testing knowledge of past tense. And then I had listening comprehension. Some of this listening comprehension came from exams that we'd already done. Some of it came from, I'll have to see, I haven't done it for a while. So this is what I recorded it itself, like Susanna and Troy mentioned. And these are the kinds of recordings that students would hear on exams at our place, on our tests. I think I would say, I'm going to be critical of this section and say that I think the student heard the whole thing twice and then had to answer questions. And I think this section of my exam could potentially ask students to retain too much information before they actually answer the questions. So I haven't modified it, but I think that it's a potential issue with this section of my exam. And here's another section, which is listening section, which is slightly harder. Questions in English to test what they were able to get out of the French. And then a third one, questions in French.
And you want them to read, and you
No,
don't
this
want
is
them to
listening.
read,
They're not-
you want
they're
them to
not- they-
listen just so they
they can't
can't go back and look again.
They can't look, they can only listen, yeah. But I had the luxury, French already had a placement test that we were no longer going to use. So I asked students for a summer and the fall semester. I had students in all first semester, second semester, third semester, and fourth semester take our old placement test and take our new placement test. And then I had scores. I had this person got this score on the old one, this score on the new one. And I took my material over to the Statistics Counseling Center consultation and paid them to correlate that for me and to give me cutoffs. So they gave me cutoffs. They said it seems that, according to the old and the new, it looks like a cutoff between this range and this range would fit nicely for F100. Cutoff range between this range and this range would fit nicely for F150. So that's how I did it, and it's working okay. I don't do what Troy did. I don't look at the scores afterwards and say, gee, you didn't do very well on listening, but you did well on grammar. So I don't really know. A student could ostensibly get all the grammar right and nothing else right and get a 52, or all the listening right and none of the other things right and get a 52, and so it's, ours is much more impressionistic. Does that make sense?
What's different?
We did not weight. I did not put any special weighting, like grammar is weighted 50%, and listening is weighted 25%, and reading is weighted 25%. Just 1 point per question, and you come up with a final score, and it seems to work. And it would, so it was less sophisticated than when Troy's presented.
What was your sample size, Kelly? What,
we
how
had-
many did you take to the?
Well, we
this?
also had several hundred.
Slick.
All together, maybe not at any given level, but we had several hundred. But I think I would do, if I didn't have the pre-existing test, I'd do what Suzanne and Troy did, and I would make it, I wouldn't offer 1% more, I'd just write it into my syllabus and say, everybody will take this as a homework assignment. That's how you could do it without doing IRB, I think. Yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry if I missed this, but are these timed?
I think it's an hour. Yeah. And
The whole exam, but not individual items, like reading items?
No.
You can
Not
set
for
it, you can time it individually, it's up to you how you time.
Right, did any of the
Did
tests?
anybody do it time
Uh,
before I?
No, ours is timed, they have an hour to do the whole thing.
Okay.
They advise us not to do it,
Mhm.
just because if there's any kind of problem, or a student has to go to the restroom during the test or something, they don't skew a particular answer, so they strongly suggest that you just do the whole test.
Okay.
And-
So is yours an hour? too?
Ours is an hour. And we did our listening comprehension, because there's an option to do 1 or 2 times. We thought about it, should we do it 1 or 2 times? We ended up just saying the student could listen to it as many times as he or she would like, because ultimately it's timed. And if you're listening to it 15 times, you're not spending time
Yeah.
answering the questions. So the whole thing, the whole test is timed, so there is a limit. So we decided that.
How did you choose an hour? Just random? Why not a
No,
hour and a half?
no, that's something else we did. On
That
the
was
pilot, on the pilot.
Imposed, wasn't it?
Was that?
Wasn't it imposed?
No.
I didn't choose an hour, it was just chosen for me.
Oh, well, you can extend it. I mean, that's why Italian has 90 minutes. I think Japanese is longer too.
Okay,
Japanese is 90
We-
minutes too.
okay.
Yeah.
We were with Keiko in our group when she developed it, but I don't remember the issues. We were
I think
all
Kate
putting
was
together.
like 200 questions or something. I can't remember. How many questions did you come up with? How many questions do you have? You like have like 200 or 300 questions.
No, we don't have that many.
Are you sure?
Well, I think so.
But I think generally I would advise against too long, because after a while, the test taker gets tired.
Yeah, your brain
And
goes mush.
do we want to test how good a test taker the student is, or do we want to test how much foreign language the
Yes.
person has?
Are we testing individual stamina, or are we testing their knowledge?
Right, exactly. So I think like an hour is well enough.
That it does not leave enough time to Google Translate or
Right.
use a dictionary.
Exactly.
Oh, I didn't think
But the
of
thing is, there is no incentive for them to do that, because they don't get, if for example, they place at the 300 level and they say, I tested out of the 2-year language requirement, the way the college controls for that, since this is a non-proctored exam, is it says, okay, you have to take then a class at the 300 level to validate.
Mhm.
You see what I'm saying?
Right.
So there's no real incentive to cheat.
Yeah.
Because if you, let's say you cheat and you do really well, it doesn't do you much good to be placed in 4th semester French if you've never had French. So,
And I don't know about your languages, I know Spanish, and I've used Google Translate for Spanish, and it would not help me in this test.
right.
It's
Yes,
just not accurate.
That's true, and in grammar questions.
Oh yeah, and since like a lot of the stuff here on with the French cartoon with Gaston, there's not. Sometimes you just have Gaston saying something like "oh," but then the questions are like that you have to kind of interpret it accurately. So it's not so much like, okay, if you translate O into O, you're not getting a lot
Yes.
out of it. Yeah, and that was the whole thing of this kind of, I don't know, and I just had to like us. I thought it was.
I like the use of visuals very much because we all use visuals a lot in our classrooms. So-
And we are a visual culture.
Right.
So-
Right. Yeah.
What was the decision for introducing non-target language in the version of comprehension? Listening comprehension or written comprehension if you're asking questions in English rather than in target language? Like, what was the decision to switch between the languages?
We don't. That's an option that's available, and we did our listening comprehension a little bit differently, so we got around that. But there are a lot of examples out there already that you do. If you're asking comprehension questions, you put it in native language. But the problem with that, why we wanted to avoid that, is not everybody that's taking this test necessarily has English as their native language. Then you're putting them at a disadvantage. So since we didn't have that as control, we tried to come up with some strategies that would accommodate all native languages, so some kind of based, listening based. But there are products out there already that, I think the BYU product is English. The questions are in English no matter what the language is. But that, and for us, it's fine. But one of the things, if you can eliminate that and still get good results, why not eliminate that?
But Kelly, have you ever had an example of a student who needed accommodation for something other than English because you had English in yours?
No.
No. Okay, good. And hundreds of students, that's very good.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it is an issue, but it's true, we are assuming that any student taking the test has English as a native language. I mean, to be admitted to the university, you're supposed to have a minimum level of English, so.
The key word here is supposed to.
I know.
And that's why I asked the question.
Yeah,
Well, in Millbury, all comprehension was in English, because it was required to assume that everyone is proficient enough.
And that's the key word. That's different between proficiency exam and again is placement exam. Because the ultimate goal of this placement exam is to make sure that we have happy students in our own
Yeah.
courses.
Yeah.
At the end of those courses, then they can take a proficiency exam
Yeah.
if they need to.
Yeah.
Those are out there too, but this product is really its only goal is to make sure that everybody's happy.
So back to the point that one of you made at the beginning, and that is that since some of the languages represented in this room, the less commonly taught languages, are probably not offered at the high school level, a placement test makes the most sense for a language for which there's a likelihood that students, a large or largest number of students may have had that language. If I were teaching a less commonly taught language, I'd probably just have a one-on-one interview or something
That's
like
what we
that.
did. They come to us with military experience in some of these languages,
Right.
we could just do it here.
This is just a quick way to process a lot of students who are coming in with a language background, so that we don't have to individually interview them.
We're glad when they come and ask us for an interview, you know?
Sure.
We have very few.
Well, and there's no reason why you couldn't do speaking and writing as well, because if you're only dealing with a couple of students at any one time, it's not burdensome to correct. But if you're dealing with hundreds of students, that becomes unwieldy.
I would advise them to spend time developing a proctored on the computer adaptive proficiency exam instead of a placement exam. That would be my suggestion.
And when I asked the productive skills question, I was still thinking
Just
proficiency
proficiency, yeah.
instead of placement, so
Yeah.
I would drop the question.
Okay. Well, proficiency, just send your people to ACTFL to.
All of our instructors and language developers, they're all BI testers because they're sought out.
Yeah, sure. I'm not surprised.
Well, are we happy?
Did you want to see briefly that?
I do.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's actually private.
Should we have a
Is this pilot site open to anybody? So our students can go on to?
No,
It's for us.
Okay.
it's thinking about it. I don't know what's.
Oh, it's
4:30.
reloading, you see, it's like,
Yeah.
the symbol is.
Yeah, it's thinking, but it's just hadn't gotten back there yet.
I wonder if I have to load it.
You might, you can do it from,
Let
the
me just-
PowerPoint, yeah, if you go to,
Let me just go back. Let me just go back. I'll log in with my email. See if it's. It's not coming up here. Can you just? I got a post it. Yep.
Yes. Oh.
I thought it would be up there already, but it's not.
and you will still be able to,
Hopefully.
Thank you.
it will come to you. Oh gosh, thinking again. Stop thinking.
It could be just
Yeah, it's like a student.
4:30 and lots of people are logging on, or.
What do I wanna really put it on?
So if it's 4:30, should not be people be logging off?
No, they're logging on to do their homework.
Oh. Okay.
Oops.
Or maybe some
That's
of those
frozen.
can't.
That's not. We.
Is it restarting those?
Is it?
Well, it's locked now. It's thinking too much.
How about restarting the system? In the meantime,
Has to be.
are you going to be at Calico?
I'm not going to be a Calico. We've never gone to Calico. We'd like to go, but we just haven't had it.
I'll just
Let me know your
I'll click on the babies.
Maybe the next one will be this one.
End of the semester. Even computers can't work. I wonder if it's, yeah, if it's like something with the server.
All right. Well, if you're interested, just send me an email and I can.
Yeah. Is it something that you could give me a false log on to or something?
Yeah.
Are you guys developing further adaptive proficiency tests?
Sure, in our copious spare time. No, we're actually very pleased to have something that works. Eventually, in another 5 or 10 years, yes, another 5 or 10 years, we might revisit it, we might have different books, we kind of like, I mean, eventually it would need to be looked at again, but at the moment it's just more or less up and running and we even what.
Yeah, hasn't the university of Oregon, what is the STAMP test? Isn't that aren't those adaptive tests for different languages?
Our university?
University of
Yes.
Oregon.
Yes, they are working on it, but they haven't actually come up with a product yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think these are for a fee. You can
Yeah,
purchase-
Yeah, of
yeah,
course,
they
yeah.
are
It's
for,
all-
they
yeah,
are
it's-
for a fee, but if you are, if they're well done, I mean, you know, adopting, or creating a test and calibrating it is time consuming, and if you only have a few students, and the IU test, by the way, the students have to pay $50 to take the test, so if the STAMP test exists and it costs $50 or something, have your students take that test, you know.
Calibration, really, the statistical part is not to be minimized. We're still, on most of our languages, we're still trying to validate the test
Yeah.
because we haven't had a sample size that's large enough to say anything with confidence.
Right, yeah.
Doesn't work?
Yeah, the website doesn't work. It's not. We broke it. We broke it.
I broke it, yeah, sorry.
Too bad. Okay,
No,
it's all right.
this,
Years ago. Well, maybe that's back because you might want to use it somewhere else.
Well, the other websites, well, that website's not working for some reason.
What if we can send you
That's right.
the browser?
Yeah, the problem is, as far as
Yeah.
I think they got rid of it.
Yes.
Oh.
I don't think we have to.
Afternoons are not my strongest time.